Hi everyone, welcome back. We're going to part number 2. We're going to continue on with our study here of the German Shepherd. And I pulled out another one here that has, and one reason why sometimes like in through here, it's very difficult to see and you can see it up there on the big one. It's one of the reasons why I like that. But inside that ear, we have a lot to do to those ears and stuff. But it's more of a pinkish kind of cast. So sometimes it's good to get a different position of a different one, and you'll be able to see those kind of pink casts and stuff in there. So if you're not sure really of one tone, you can look at, now they're slightly different colors, but some of the anatomy colors, are going to be very similar. So anyway, so I pulled out another one here to look at. And this is, you'll see that catch light on there, and we can decide whether or not we're going to put that catch light into his onto his pupil there to give him that extra little spark. We'll decide that. I'm leaning towards doing it because it makes it just a little more lively. So we'll see as we get there. But first, what I need to do before we start to work on him, work on his body, get some more in his face here, I'm going to push back the cooler colors that you see there on that one there. And one of the things is I haven't decided yet whether or not I'm going to put some of that ocean or the waves. Probably not. But I love the colors there. And so if you squint down really thing, when you look at a photo like that, it can just show you the colors and take away the waves and all that kind of stuff and see if you like those kinds of colors. Squinting down is a thing that artists use to eliminate details. And it also compresses medium value areas. And so you get a lot of just the light to dark of a painting. So I do a lot of squinting down from time to time. But first I'm going to take this off and we'll just move it over here for just a moment so we can work on the background here. So I moved over, I transferred all of my colors to a brand new palette. Now it's been a day. I didn't paint on it yesterday because it was my wife's birthday. So we took the day off, did some shopping, did a lot of fun things. So I'm back on it again, but these are the same colors. I put out a little fresh colors like into the burnt sienna and a little bit more into here and some extra white. And as I transferred the white here, you can see it stayed really nice. And all I did was put a piece of palette paper over it. They'll stay nice. These colors are made to stay nice. I got some blue in it, which is what I need for what I'm going to be doing with him first. So the first thing I do is I hold the value scale up like this, up along there. And you can see that is really more, this is a little bit to a blue violet. That up there is a little bit more to a blue green in value. And matter of fact, I can take this over and we can hold that right here so you can see that. And you can see it's up. So it's a little bit lighter than a blue-green actually. And it's up real high, almost a 10. So, 9 to 10. I'm thinking more like 9. Now, Phthalo Blue by itself is a blue-green. So just that dirty stuff that I had here is probably going to get me pretty close. And I'm also going to put out in today's painting now as we get going. So, I mean, that is, golly, pretty darn close to what we need. Now, if I want to gray it down or harmonize it, which is one of the things I do like to do, I'm going to take any one of his main colors. The one that I like is the burnt sienna. And I'm just going to take a little bit of that burnt sienna here and put it into that. You can see, let me just put a little of it over here. You can see how it changes the tone. See how it grays it down slightly? Warms it up, grays it down slightly. See the slight difference in it? And that is going to be huge on this painting because of a property of color theory we call the law of disproportionate color. Okay? What does that mean? The law of disproportionate color is something that every artist needs to be aware of because it's as you increase the area that you're going to use of a color, you need to decrease its saturation or its intensity, its brightness. You need a good color that is going to harmonize throughout your painting. And because the eye, as the area of a color increases, the eye's ability to see that color increases, and so you see more within that color. It's just like this. You go to your home store and you look at this little color chip. Oh, that's going to be great on that wall. And then you go paint that wall, and all of a sudden the wall looks like a different color. And it's like, is that the same chip? Or you take that into a different room and it looks different in that room under a different light than it does here. That's the law of disproportionate color. It's the same color, but the eye's ability to see it increases, and the color will appear to change. So what am I saying here? I'm using a blue in a background. Looks really nice here on the palette, but when I go put it around him, everywhere around here, I'm going to have to adjust it for what we're doing here. Does that make sense? Just keep that in your mind. So I'm going to add a bit of this burnt sienna into here and take it off color just a bit, and we'll see where we're going to go with it here. We might do a little more, might do a little less. Now so I have out my extender medium. This is the Heritage extender medium. I'll use that in thin color areas, and then I'll use the open medium, which Matisse Derivan manufactures our colors for us here. So I know that this particular color, these particular colors here, I'm just going to clean my knife off a bit. I know these colors, this open medium works because I know the formula, so it works with both of them. So I'll be using the open medium, and you can see it's quite a bit thicker, and they both have extremely slow drying times. And so as I add it, it's going to give me some time to brush move some hair, some fur, stuff like that, okay? All right, so, but I'm gonna start out within this background. I want it to be kind of transparent. So I'm gonna pick up my big brush, and I'm gonna mix in here some of our, and I love that, even some medium beige might look really nice in there. So let's come through, and this is and I'm going to paint into him just a bit. I know that sounds crazy, but we need lost and found edges. And I'm going to lift the pressure. You can see here, I'm going to do a very casual technique here. And yeah, I'm going to do this a couple of times for the painting here. So, and I'm going to leave some of that background color coming through. This is only we're doing a portrait. And I love John, you've heard me talk about him in the first video, John Howard Sanden's, how he paints his backgrounds. And those of you that watched his retrospect, that I put the link to his retrospect in the video description of the first video. And he talks about Oppenheimer and how Oppenheimer makes his colors flow heavily one into the next. Oh, it's just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Sometimes I do this with my other hand, just because my other hand's a little more casual than my dominant hand, which is my right hand here. And I love this. I love the streaks that come from this. So I let some of that streaking happen. So, you can paint the entire scene if you want, or you can do like I'm kind of planning, is like I like to do with the portraits, is I like to just do some impressionistic background. So I'll get a little heavier here. Let's put some of this right up in here. And I'll paint, like I said, right into the edge of the ear a little bit. Don't need to be perfect. I want these edges here to be a little bit lost as I do this and move this back and forth here. I want them to be a little bit lost because they'll keep the interest right in here on him. So I'll paint some of that into his ear, grab that color into that a bit, and we'll just lose those edges. We'll do some fun stuff there with it. But right around where his face and stuff is going to go, I'm going to want to really, and I've got this a little straight here, so I'll just blur this into that face, right? And right around in some of that area there, I'm going to want to really put in some more colors, work in maybe some lighter colors. You can see that light wave, the line of the wave. I might want to keep that. Let me drop in a little thicker color here. Now, this isn't done. We're going to revisit this. So I'll drop in a little thicker, heavier color here, right into that area. And that's going to just lift this part of his body off here. Now, sometimes I'll do this with the knife, and I'll look at that, and I'll go, ooh, that looks nice. Let's grab a little white, maybe just a touch more gray, maybe a bit of this. So we'll gray this white off, but we'll keep it lighter, right? Here. And so value-wise, I'm really up there. Look at this. It's really as a 9, right? Okay. And so, you know, and sometimes I do this kind of stuff with the knife. There's a wonderful, wonderful portrait painter, and he's on YouTube and stuff as well, Volgrov, and he, it's Volgrov, and watch his painting. Oh, he's a romantic painter, impressionistic romantic painter, and he does the vast majority of his backgrounds around these beautiful subjects with his knife, and that just pops it off here. So, and it's just such lovely backgrounds here. So I might leave some of this knife and, you know, the impressions of the knife here to really pop that light off. Let's look maybe right back down in here like this and just drag that right out and give that impression out there here. So, and I should carry this color through. You know, Sanden is, you know, Volgrov is very, very thick and interesting with his backgrounds. Sanden is a little bit more, I want to say, a little bit more controlled in the modeling of it. And so you can determine what it is you want to do. That's what makes it all fun, right? So we'll push this right into that side to help him recede his side here. But you can see instantly, maybe I pick up a little more blue and light, slightly different color here, and we build that right in there, a little different color right there like that there, and that pops him off even more right here. You know, will that stay? Now we might want to take some of this blue and soften this here and just soften some of that mark, pull through. I'll leave some of this. I'm going to leave some of these knife textures and stuff in there. I like that. I like that a lot. And we'll just touch a little bit of this, just of this light and stuff through here. Just a little bit to break that up. That looks pretty good. Now, let's go down at the bottom. You have all these rocks and gray colors and all that kind of stuff. And again, I squint down and I look at that and I was like, okay, so let's take some blue, some beiges, a little bit of blue, a little bit of burnt sienna and browns. Model this all up a little more. If it's too blue, get the burnt sienna in there. That will kill the gray color in it. And so I don't use up all of that real pretty white over there because we need that for his painting. I'm just going to squirt in a little more white here. Model this up here. That's kind of a real nice kind of grayish tone here. We'll add some extender here. And let's drop some of that down in through here into the ground of him, right up through here. And just some of this color. Well, and again, this is your first look, so we'll do more. We'll do other bits and stuff like that on him. Maybe a little bit of chunky color there. Leave that. Let some of the brown, some of the initial wash of our background come through here. That looks good. Change color, maybe a little more beige here. Some of that comes back in here, right in there. I used to, when I first started out and I would do something like this, I just felt like, oh, I could never do it. It was so casual. I could just never do something like this. And after a little bit, the biggest thing about it is confidence and realizing, you know, the hardest thing for you is you're looking at mine, and so those of you that like it a lot will try to copy it, and you can't. I can't even paint it again this way, the same way. So, you know, you just kind of let some of those things go and you put in what you think looks pretty good. That's how we do it. Let's put a little more interest right back in here of that ground, right with our knife here. And I'll soften some of this out but I just want to get some of the feeling of the ground here. Right in here like that. Just some of the feeling here. And yeah, and then we'll let most of it just until we get some more of our dog on. I'll paint this right up into him a bit here. And just real thick paint, some extender. It just moves. It just looks pretty good that way, sitting like that. So, and we don't know. I mean, I'm probably, well, I am. I'm just rinsing this out of this brush so it stays nice. These are the 2-inch wide Fusion. They're very, very soft, and they always start out as a varnish brush. This one is about 10 years old. Started out for the first couple years as my varnish brush, and then after they get varnish left in a few times, they get a little bit stiffer, I move them over to my painting brushes and stuff. So I just love them. Okay, so good stuff. Okay. So I kind of like that, and I really, really like, and I really maybe want to have just a little bit more that gray light right in here. And leave some of that texture right there. And we'll just smear some of that out. Leave some of the edge of that texture, because that's what's really pulling his face right there. Do you see that? Really pulling his face here. And this is what Volgroff does. So if you, go over, and if you really want to get brave, or some of you like going, ooh, I don't know if I could ever do that. Go watch. He's got a Vladimir Volgroff. He's got a lot of videos, and just watch how he does some of that stuff with a knife. It's just, there's so much confidence, and so much confidence and so much experience that comes out in the placement of those colors. But you'll see throughout his whole painting, he'll change that area a dozen times during the painting, which is what I like, So now look how that causes him to jump off. And he's totally changed now from where we were, right? Yeah, so that's really good. So now we can come in and we can put in some more colors and work on him a bit, and keep going. But you see, it's changed the whole perception of him. So some of these areas, as a matter of fact, let's do this while that edge is wet, or so. Take any kind of brush here, small brush. This is a small synthetic filbert. The synthetic filbert, sometimes when I start out with the Fusions, and then sometimes as the paint gets thicker and thicker, the Fusion becomes very, very soft. And sometimes if I'm dealing with real thick paint, I'll move over to a synthetic. I'll go back and forth. They're a little different. So I'm going to take a little burnt sienna, a little of this color, maybe a touch of the blue here into some of this. And we'll come in here and we'll work this edge just a little bit here. The edge of his face and his nose. Blur that edge, soften and blur that edge just in a few areas here, because that is gonna, and we'll add some dark here up on this one point. While that's all nice and wet and chunky, I wanna work that edge. Let's put a little bit of raw sienna right down in here. Just tap that in. That's the edge, and I'll push in and out of that edge lightly with my finger and blur that edge. I know it's really hard to see, but I'll blur that edge ever so slightly so that it's not sharp. You may leave like the edge of the nose or something like that a little bit more distinct, but more of a sharp edge. I don't want to ridge a paint or anything, but why would I blur that particular? Because that's on the back side of his nose. So I want that little edge blurry. And then up here on his nose here, first I'll start out a little darker, but I might bring this up a little bit more contrasty again. So that's really going to pop his face forward. See how that really pops his face forward? And then I'll take some of this light blue, which is right there, maybe a bit of the burnt umber into it. Nice light little color, and let's work that as a gray right into that. That's just a little too light, so get a little umber and a little blue into that here. And model that right there into that. Don't take all of his nostril out, Dave. Right in here, into the edge of that nose. So this part of that comes up a little bit more. And let's get that burnt umber and blue and a little red violet, that real dark. Let's get that right in here. The inside of his nostril there, again, real dark. And we'll look up at that edge. Take a little burnt umber, a little raw umber, a little bit of our light color here. And see what I'm doing is just tapping along. So I want this edge that's below here and up in his flue, right up and down into here, I want it maybe a little bit more than that edge, and that's gonna give that little bit of depth to it. Let's get this nose. Edges, edges, edges. And you know, as you study more, especially all of you beginners here, okay, edges are so important. You get a crisper edge line where it is going to advance, and then you blur it where it's going to recede. Because as something goes away, you see less detail, and you don't see the edges, right? So that's something that we as artists have to be very careful with, is our edges. So I'm going to take a little bit of both those colors. I'll push them into the edge of his nose here, right in there. And we'll put up maybe a little bit of light, stuff that happens right down in here, right in there, right like that. Just work those edges. That's the important. Let's get some of that dark back in there again. Burnt umber and blue. Some of that real dark right here. We'll go down his philtrum here. Right down there, separate that a bit. Right down towards that flue. And we'll get just a touch lighter, maybe a bit of the burnt sienna and just something of value or two lighter here. And we'll put on the lower part, tap that into the lower part of the nose there. Maybe a light little edge here on the edge of his upper lip, the flue area there. There like that, okay. And see, I'll just work that. There's a little light, some of this light blue that's going to hit the edge of the nose. Now I'm starting to get a little detailed just because it's fun to paint, and I'll look at that up there, but I don't need to really get that detailed yet. We're not there yet, but you can see now he's really starting to come together. Now, the one thing there that is so an important line is I have this the bottom of this flue and the edge of his face here a little bit too much the same. So I have to get a little more lighter yellow into that backside back there. So you can see that curvature of his upper lip. That's important. So I'm going to put a little light right back up here and lighten that to where you see his upper lip there again. Maybe just a touch lighter. And I start to look, you know, and some of these areas are pretty close to being where I really like them. So I'm being very careful to make sure my eyes start focusing down and seeing a little more detail. Let's just tap a little raw sienna in there. And again, blur that just a bit. Blur that edge. There we go. But you can see now the lower part of his upper lip there, his flue right there. You can see that pretty good. Now, let's take that raw sienna, a little bit of the burnt and all that. Let's just go ahead and draw that tiny little bit of the light that we see curving around his upper lip there. And then we'll paint some of the burnt sienna, blue, some of this right down into here again. So we'll just tap some of those colors in there. Get some of that color movement there into that one. There. And light little edge back up to that burnt, you know, that medium beige, a touch of yellow into it. Raw sienna and yellow oxide. Boy, that's just such a pretty color to hit some of these little lights too. That medium beige, it's just nice. We'll hit the inside of his nostril on that side. There. like that, crossed. Maybe that's a little too light right there, so we'll just dirty that down here. Let's just pull a little bit of that right in here. That part of his nose there. And get some of that gray in there too. Cross the colors a bit. A little bit of that gray happening in there. That's these tiny little touches of color. And those of you that, you know, paint rocks and stuff with me in the landscapes, what do we call that? That's, and I'm a huge advocate of that when you're painting rocks and stuff. What do we call that? Broken color. Broken color is the color changes, variations within, you know, a particular color passage. It might be, it's about the same value, but it might change the hue to slightly blue, slightly green, slightly yellow. And that's where you get all of your interest, right? Let's take a little bit of burnt umber and dark, maybe a touch of red violet, that real, real dark. Shape up his nostril here a bit, right there. And look how clear, crisp that is right up there. That's good. And we'll blur this down, right down into that light we did there. That looks pretty good for him on that side. And we'll push a bit of that right up here. Again, a little bit of that blue. This is a nice broken color here. Bit of that right up here. Its nose could be a little straighter right here. Just a touch of it. Little things, as you get to this point, the little things are so important on him. You know, so yeah, it is. And I'll be looking for little advances of the line, especially right here. I got those right as a tangent line, the ends of the nose and his muzzle and his basically his nose here. So, and it should step out just a little bit there, and then come back in to the nose. So I start to look at some of those little areas there, see? So now you see him really start to come forward here. Let's take just a bit of that light right up here on this side. So it just comes, and then let's darken that flue there just a bit here, just a touch right there, so it really sticks out. So you really see that upper lip and it riding right back up into that. So, and that's a lot of detail right now, but see this detail that I'm working in here, it's fun because you see him really come to life, right? But I really like this area and it's popping him all forward. So this area right in here is going to control the rest of my painting, right? So, and I want to get that kind of correct right now. So let's take some burnt sienna, maybe just a touch of that red in there. Let's put some of that in the back of his tongue, back up there into the shadow here, right? And he's got a cast shadow just like this guy. He has that cast shadow. I don't want to put that photo up while this is almost dry. So we can maybe get that photo back up there. Don't want to hit that beautiful white up there too much. So get this back up where we can look at it here. There we go. And that's going to get too much into your guys' view of that, isn't that? Over just a touch. So that'll probably do it. So you can look at that here. Later on when this gets dry, I'll drop that down to make it easier here. But let's go ahead and let's go take some of this blue, a little bit of this white, just the edge of the brush here. Paint's kind of dry, and we'll drag it right like this over the edge of the nose, which will create that little light, that little highlight we see there. A little bit more here. A little bit more. And if I get too much, I tap it and push it off. But a little bit more there, that's fine. And let's come up this side here. So we got that. We got to get that pink in there. Let me get that. So burnt sienna and that red make the pink. A little bit of beige or the medium beige or burnt umber or something in there will tone it down. So we'll just put a bit of that in there like that. That medium value, that medium tone, little bit, tiny bit lighter pink. This is where I start to really focus down, guys, in subtle changes in the tone. So a little bit lighter, a little bit more pink up here on this front part, right up in here. So it can go and be, look at this tongue there. See, it's light, and then see that. It's like when you're painting a human portrait, you know, the lips, the nose, the tips of the ears get really red. Sargent always showed that. I mean, really red, because those are where there's a lot of little blood vessels and stuff, and they get a lot of blood flowing through them, and they get really pink. Well, their tongues are that way. So they'll get a little bit more and a little bit more red right there. Right there. And that pink. And so I'll work that in. And see, I'm adding just a touch of the extender. You could add the open medium up here as well, but that extender is working pretty nice. And then we'll take some of this pink and stuff, as you see in there, and we'll add a bit of this light blue. This is going to be the grayer color that you see back through the center part of his tongue here. And it's a great color because it also brings in the background into his color there, into his tongue there. But we go with a little bit more of the light blue, light white, right in the edge of that. And that makes the light struck area, because this is all in shadow. This makes a little light struck area across his tongue. It could be even a little lighter yet. Right across his tongue. This is, sometimes it's good just to use your maul stick here. And slow down. Here, right in there. To make that light strike across his tongue there. And then we'll take some of the other pink here. Just soften that a bit. There, like that. That's looking pretty good. There, he's got a nice light little tooth. It's not pure white, so we'll gray it down. A little blue, a little beige here. And let's add that light little mark right in there. Suggest that tooth. Blur off some of those edges. Yeah, there's actually another little point right in there. We'll just hit that as well. Right there. You can barely see it, but take a little burnt umber, burnt sienna. We'll just tap along the edges there, incorporate that in. Right like that. Might want to, on the outside, he's got just a, you know, and this is where my eye focuses down. Look for changes. Just a touch lighter there to the outside. And this is, you know, when you're looking for these tiny little details, I know it's hard to sometimes people think, oh boy, that's just, you know, I don't want to put that much into it. You don't have to put that much into it. But for me, when I'm painting a consignment piece for somebody that this was their best friend for so many years, I'm going to make sure I capture it. I'm going to make sure I capture it, and I capture the character and everything about this beautiful animal. And so I, you know, there's some things I'll bring out a little more, some things I won't, but I'm going to make sure I capture it for those people, because this was their buddy, and I love my dogs. You see them on the videos here all the time. I love them. And so I can see why you'd want to have a, you know, a really nice capture of them, you know. Let's get that medium beige, a little bit of that white. These are secondary catch lights. It shows the wetness of the nose. This is why we do it. Blue, blue, medium beige. Little catch light, secondary one right down there. Little one right in there. That's a little light right in there, but it'll hopefully dry down just a touch. Yeah, so now we've got this whole area to kind of look at and see, and I'm going to put just a touch of that beige right here on this side of that tooth here. That's good. Let's get some of the burnt umber, burnt sienna. This will help us with, and just model on your brush. Don't mix it. Model it, and we'll use this to bring the edge of this tooth back in line with the design a bit. And I think I took out too much there, so we'll just wipe some of it back. There we go. Just model some of that dark in here into these areas, right like that. And a little bit of light. So when I've got all this like into his lower jawline here, his low lip, I'm just going to kind of tap and model some of these colors in there. It's got a lot going on. And so I just want to get that feeling of a lot going on. That's all. This little, this is a what? A number 4 fusion, not fusion, it's a number 4 synthetic filbert is working really, really nice. I was a filbert painter, a sole filbert painter for many years. That's all I used was the filberts. And I like them because you can roll up on the chisel and draw really easy, or you can pull back down and do a flat stroke. I like the filberts a lot. And so let's put some of that light right in there. Let that just come together to make that. You know, they have a lot going on in their lower jawline and lip, and that's what I'm just emulating some of that right now. And so just some of those marks there, those lights and darks there. And you might as well, you know, you can take, there's a bunch of different ways we're going to do hair and stuff, and I'm going to show you as we go into the painting. But a small, let's see, those are dark. So, but when you have this thick, and this is starting to tack up and stuff here a little bit, so that's pretty good. But, and you use kind of dry and a little bit of your synthetic, or not synthetic, this is a bristle, and just pull down a bit. This will give the little hairy edge there to that chin right there that we want to put in. So, and we're going to have some, and I'm going to show you all different kinds of ways, but we'll blur some of this, tapping it around. The bristle does a really good job of that. But I'm going to show you all different kinds of ways to do it too. But this little bit right in there and that chin and this we can just touch and then lift off and let the tip of the bristle just drag some of those hairs. I'm going to show you some other ways and stuff as well. But so we got to get a bit of that out there. And you know, there's a lot of ways, but some of this we can drag out just a bit to give a furry little edge there to the edge of his face. As you can see, it's a working back and forth. Let's just use this bristle for a minute and just scumble work some of this back in here. Some of our sienna right in there. And that'll give that rough back and forth, maybe a few little hair lines, a bit of burnt sienna, a bit of burnt umber with that raw sienna here. So it varies, it's a little darker. A little bit of scumbled out here. Just lift and pull out, that gives that. And you know, you can, oh, that was a little, took off a little too much there. There we go. But we want to keep that edge soft, so I have that on there. Now I'm going to come in and soften it. A little bit of the light, maybe a touch of the blue, which is my background, which will gray this color up a bit. And it works the softness into it. And a lot of times when I'm working on a receding edge like this, I soften it out more than what the photo may show. I tend to do that. But as we go up, we'll work some brighter, like yellows right up here, right there, like that, right? That's good. So that's got a good little look and down that side there. Now, sometimes, you know, when you're dealing with real tiny stuff, and we're going to have some other hairs and stuff out there. It's really soon to do this, but I'll show you. I mean, I like to do it also with wet paint and the edge of a knife and just draw them out. And you only need a few of them, and you just rotate the knife until you, I know you guys can probably hardly see that, but let me tell you, it's awesome. So, yeah, and I'll approach it really, really slow right now. Just a few of them out at different angles, just to break that line ever so much. There, just a little bit there. And it's just wonderful. Maybe, and then I'll accentuate some areas, maybe a bit more with my little bristle right here. I'll just put that light little edge right there. drop that in. That you might see, those are all little things, but you can see he's really popping to life there. And like right in here, might be, you know, you see that darker wave line color coming in there. We might take a different gray right in there in just a bit and you know, push it out there. There's just so many things we can do. But let's go into, and this is still, yeah, I touched into that, still a little wet. But I'm going to see if I can drop it down a bit more so we can look at the structure and of his ears and his face and get some of his anatomy going here a little bit more here, okay? Let's even that out just a bit, right about like that. Just a little closer so you can see it a little closer. So let's work at bringing out some of his anatomy. We'll work into his ears and stuff, and then I'll bang in some color out here. That's a good plan. Okay, so, and we'll work on that. So let's go up and we'll say, yeah, see, it's a little bit more yellow, a little bit more raw sienna color than my value scale shows here. Now these value scales, again, there's links down, especially in the video one, where to go get it. Go over to jansenartstudio.com, go to up at the top menu, go to downloads, and you can buy, you know, you can not buy, but you can just download these. I've made all of these, and then you print them off, and then I cut it up, and then I put packing tape on both sides. So, you know, I get paint on it. I can clean it off really easy, okay? So I got a little bit of paint there. I can clean that off really easy. So it's going to help me with assigning some of those values in and around an 8 right up there, okay? So I'm going to go back to maybe my 10 or so. And I'm going to go I'm just going to go yellow oxide, some raw sienna, some maybe a touch of the, and this is just all to give me a different color, but I want to get this all up around that 8 that I want right in there. And I'm going to push that down here. And I'm going to follow kind of the structure there of his face. And I'm going to look for that. So you can see it. And I use my brush like this. You can see it modeled. And I just lay that down on there pretty heavy. And then I'll soften it out afterwards. So I pick it up like this, all modeled. That's what's going to make his hair, you know. And I love to do it this way. And I love the textures. And sometimes I have to do stuff like this 3 or 4 times to get the look that I want to get. But I drag it like that, and it starts to look like the hair, doesn't it? See? But and you might have to mix this up several times because we want this to stay modeled, right? Yeah, and I'll push up, which expands the hairs out and gives you more, sometimes some different looks. Now, I do hair and fur on animals and stuff, all different kinds of ways. This is just one I really like to do. So now we'll drop let's grab just a little bit more of the yellow into that. Tap that right in there, right? That's good. And we'll drop down and let's restate that one right there, that's right about the right color, but I want to get some more interest to it. So we're going to go a little more beige, and we can start adding open medium too, which will give you a little transparency, but it's going to keep this really wet, right? So let's look at that. It's going to pull kind of like this. Set that up right in there. I'll leave some of those little streaks, which just gives a nice feeling of that fur. It could go a touch lighter and a touch heavier. Set your brush very flat like this and let the brush just drag it right there. And if you repeat it too many times, you'll lose all of your streaks. So you don't want to repeat it too many times. I'm going to go just a touch lighter. So the second I put it on, I step back. I'm very, it's like what Sargent says, very deliberate with your marks. I'm very deliberate with my marks. And I just looked at it and I said, I'm too white. I'm going to tap in a little yellow. Let's make that mark again. Right like that. There we go. That's a good mark. That's pretty good. It's a little light right here, but I think it's going to dry down enough, right? Yeah, right there. That's pretty darn good. Okay, so, and that's how I like to do it. So I'm going to be looking at all of the hair right around in here what is it that's making that mark. A little darker, I'll slide right over here. I'll pick that up. Let's just pull down at that angle ever so slightly and get some of that hair right in there like that. Right? Now let's get the big stop up here at the big stop, right where his muzzle starts to head into the head. Lighter color again right in here. And it's a little narrow from what it is here. I have to widen this out, so I got to go up that side just a bit. Now, that's really too light. I wanted to show you a mistake. No, I don't take it off. I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab some darker colors, beiges and siennas and stuff, and I'm going to go right into that while it's wet. Just right into that. And that's going to give me even more stuff. Sometimes, you know, I'll do stuff like that and leave it a little too light and then just push some dark right in it. You have open medium in this now, so you've got a couple hours to do this with. It's going to stay wet to push it around. So, and I'm just going to push it around. And I might revisit all of this again here as I add even more textures to him and stuff, depending on. Now, little half tone, slightly darker down here on this side. Let's just pull that right down here, a little bit darker there. Now, I don't like to use my finger too much because that smooths it out quite a bit. So, and I like, if I'm painting hair, I like to do the brush as much as I can. Let's go more raw sienna right here. And we'll pull down and into that light. Pull down and into the light here. And let's go a little bit more burnt sienna as I come over here. Nice, slightly darker tone. I'll look at that one right there. Maybe let's push up a bit. Pull down. Gets a good look onto him there. So see, I'll push up, which widens the brush out stuff, but all of these little marks here will get all of that feeling of his hair there. And we can use a smaller brush and go back and do even more, you know, later on if we want. Let's go more burnt sienna right here, and we'll add a few little marks of that, a little bit more burnt sienna. It looks like it could have a tiny bit of blue or so into it as well, just to take it gray, just a touch. Here, too much. Right up in here. Let's look at this. Right up like that. There we go. That's not too bad. Here. Maybe a small mark of that. I'll look to other planes that I can push in at the same time. So there's a good plane right here. I can get some of that tone in there, right in there. Now that kind of narrowed down his forehead just a bit, had to stop, so I might push up just a bit, push up and back a bit. Maybe wipe the brush and move this light over again, just a little bit. There we go. Just like that. Now, that is lighter there still, but you got to remember, you know, acrylics dry down, so we've got to remember that. So I might leave that a little bit lighter. Let's pull some of the angled strokes here that we see, some of the side strokes that we see here. Right, let's go a little bit more of that gray burnt sienna down here into transitional tones here. Maybe a bit of raw sienna in that. So this all has open medium in it, so it's staying nice and wet, and I'm just working the tones through where I see in there, right? So, yeah, and so let's just go right back with this light. Let's widen out across the nose a bit here, which needs to widen his muzzle here. There, a few marks of that here, there. Let's soften this up and down here point just a bit. Use just a corner of my brush, I can do that. Let's pull a little more light right down here under that upper brow. Right there, that looks pretty good, right? And that light stroke, model into some of that light. Let's come right back here and put that right in there. A little bit more heavy, a little extra open medium. We'll keep it just a touch transparent. Push, pull. There, could go a touch more here, lighter. There we go. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And so it's really starting to set some of this. Let's get some of this raw sienna and some of this right down into here, a little bit into this, the eye, following the marks of his face. A little bit of that grade. Always following the structure of his face. So I'm putting on highlights and shadows and following the structure of his face. I could use a touch more of a transitional tone right in here as it heads up, right in there. And my lab has joined me here underneath my table. Right under here. So if you start to hear the snoring pretty soon, just understand. She likes to be in here. So we'll grab this. So there we go. And we could, let's get a burnt sienna, a little bit of that blue, that transitional kind of grayish tone right in here. Right in there, push that around a bit. Lots of modeling of the tone. Could have, I remember I put that, in the first one I put some of that violet in there. We can work some of that violet in there as well. That's a little too violet. Let's get a touch of burnt umber into that. That's pretty. That's a nice, beautiful tone. Pull down to get some of the modeling of that. Could have I've got that kind of, it's got some areas there, but maybe just that tiniest bit more blue here, slightly darker. These are what we call the broken colors of this as well here. So see, they're all darker tones and they're all kind of shifting. The values are staying dark, but their hues are shifting, and that's what we call the broken color, right? So it's a little too smooth right there. So we'll take a bit of burnt sienna and we'll gray that down. Some more raw sienna into this, a little touch of the light, just kind of a medium kind of light here. And just break up, tapping down, just pulling the feel of this eye socket, this down a little further there. Could have, you could see like a quicker change of the dark to the light, the mid-tone there, which is almost giving this modeling effect to it. So a little bit of blue, burnt sienna, some of that. Let's just kind of put that dark into that area. Here, a little touch, which kind of just almost like spots it up a bit, see? There. And it's still just a touch more blue. Now, if you're a beginner, you might not see these subtle variations, but you're still going to paint a nice animal portrait. And then as you get better and better, your eye gets attuned to the color and you study color theory, that part of the process, you'll get better at it. But you only get better at it if you keep trying. So you look at my first animal portraits, they're like, yeah, okay. But you look at them now, they get better and better. And that's how it works, guys. It's not that you can't do it. It's how much you're going to practice to get to it. How much are you going to devote to get to it in that animal, in the painting of that animal, right? That's what we do. Let's get a little darker. Let's work this line a little darker right here. That's where we see that coming out there, right? And let's take a little bit of the softer one right up here. Get this line of the lip right there. There we go. And see, it's just a slow process. Maybe a touch of the violet in there. Change the tone up a bit. Burnt sienna, a little burnt sienna, a little burnt umber, a little bit of the medium beige to lighten it ever so little. As I get to the outer areas here that are not as important, I will start painting a lot faster. That's what I'll do. Right, I'll start painting a little faster. We'll get some of that area in there, right? And yeah, and it'll really start to look like we know what you're doing. Now, we'll grab some open medium right with that tone. I like that tone. So I'll grab some open medium, and I'm going to push that tone in here. It's a little dark. I know it is. But I'm going to then add some raw sienna, a little open medium. That'll keep it wet for a minute. A little bit of that violet in that. Let's push some of that right down in here. Right, just push that around in there a bit. Right, and then let's go to a half tone, halfway between that light and dark here. A little bit more of the yellow. Let's push that in, right in here like this. This is another way I love to paint the animals, pushing these tones around like that. Let's reset that dark because I took a lot out. So we'll reset it here. Reset that dark all the way back up here towards this eye socket area there. There. Okay. Could go just a touch wider. It has that tiniest little bit of that violet in there. Really is nice, making a difference here. Let's soften that little mark. See, it's still wet. See, this is still wet from when I did that earlier. It's going to stay wet for a while. Let's now go with, take that, lighten that up, a little bit of white, a little bit of beige, which will keep it from going too yellow. We do want it yellow, though. That's too, not enough yellow. So let's model a little open medium, model that here. Let's now grab these marks here. Grab those marks. Lift the pressure and just drag it a little bit or push back and forth to get some of that fur movement there. Right, and we can go a little heavier right in here. There. And we'll grab a little bit of dark and we just whisper right along that edge here, breaking that edge. Pick up some of the dark, break that starting edge. Pick up some more dark and just soften that edge right in there. And we can take a medium kind of value here, transitional tone, and soften these edges down. Just lightly with the, this is what the Fusion brush is designed to do. These real light touches. Now, I've got the hair curved down, that's pulling up right in here. That's pulling down, but it doesn't curve down. So I've got the curvature wrong there. You can also use your knife. I've showed some of you over the years here of using your knife. Let's take a little bit of this. Let's just push in the knife right in there. Okay, I did this on mountain lions, on their fur and stuff. I love to do this. I'm going to take my brush, wipe out some of that, and then just pull through slightly into the angle that I see here. And then I'll take this edge. Now this edge, I can burnish this with the knife, boom, 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 get rid of that, like I do a cloud and stuff, or I can take the dark and just lay it in like this and get that smoother little transitional tone right in there. And I like to do both. Now, let's get that back up where it should be into the light. So open medium, white, little beige, little yellow. Let's get him up light like he should be. So we know, so we can see. And then we can correct some more later. Let's get that light up here, right down in here like that. That's building that side of his face. And then we'll come in with that transitional tone, slightly darker, to soften those edges. Tap in, soften those edges, right like that. Okay, soften those marks there. Sometimes I'll take it and push up and back just to soften that edge a bit. Because the light is hitting the highs and lows of the hair there, right? And let's just wipe our brush and pull down. And then reset that with some darks right here. And build that a couple times, see? I like that. I'm gonna reset that light one more time here. Sometimes I'll do it many times, like I told you, many times. I love the textures as I start to build more and more paint in there. I love those textures. I like to see them right up like that. That looks good. Put some of that right up here. Right in there. A nice little transitional tone right here. Pull that down. That's better. A little bit wider. There we go. That's better. That's getting that. Let's build this other little bit more open medium, a little bit of light. Let's build this side right in here. Same thing here. Soften that out. Little sienna, little raw sienna. Here we go. Soften that mark down. Sometimes you see those. We'll take some of this light right on the corner of the brush. I call these the little sparks. You'll pick up just little areas of it. He's got that tiny little area right there, a little bit right in here. That's too much. Let's just soften that out with a little dark. Too much. There we go. Leave little sparks of it though. And I've got that a little curved right there. It has to come follow that contour of that eye socket a bit more. Here. Back and forth a few times till you get it right. There, like that. Till you get that right. That's good. Let's take some of that raw sienna, a little bit of that red violet, touch of the blue maybe, or the burnt umber, burnt sienna. Model all that together, a bit of your open medium. Let's work that right down in here again. Pushing that right down into some of this area. Right down here, a little bit more blue as we come to this backside back here. Cools off a bit, but we also want to fade it into this background. So we don't want to do anything harsh lines back here. We'll let it kind of soften and fade. More so maybe than what you see in the photo. We'll let it soften and fade because we want to create that lost edge. And we have the blue right here that we could actually paint that edge back in a little softer. And this is the difference between painting a painting with that. See how it softens that back edge before it pulls him out. We'll soften it, and then we'll slowly add a little bit more here till we determine just how much we want to have. So a little softer color, that's pretty. And that edge is just so broken, see? It's just broken edge, so it recedes. Let's drop this in here. And let's get some of that light right back up here. There's a couple of really pretty marks that really set his fur line and stuff there. And some of this there like that. That's pretty. I love the painterly look of it. That's what I like to do. And now, sometimes as I go work this area, I'm going to show you a different way here too, is I like to pre-paint it with just a little bit of the extender. This will go in, soak up into the board a little bit, and so the board does not soak up the paint quite so fast. This also makes this area slicker, so I can move color really quickly. And usually I will do something like this. I'm going to set this 10 down. And my favorite painting brush of all, especially into the animals, if I can find it here, is I had it here earlier. Oh, it's sitting right over here, is my 3/4 inch. My Fusion 3/4 inch. Let's take a little burnt sienna, a little raw sienna, a little bit of our touch of these colors here. Just a touch, a little bit more burnt sienna, raw sienna. Add some extender to this so it's a little bit thinner, I'll put some of that as an undertone. See how it's a little bit kind of reddish compared to what's there. And that pine green will take care of that. Put in just a little bit of pine green, because if it looks too red, you need a green. Does that make sense? We'll get a green and a yellow green in there, because the green is the complement of the red. Does that make sense? So we'll get that in. That gets that color a little closer to what I'm looking at right there. And it got it in pretty thick, so I can just back some of that out. Then we can take some of this light. Let's go medium beige. Let's go some yellow, some open medium here. And we can use this to start putting on some of the fur strokes here, right? First, I start to think the undercolor here. So I start to work that first. And I'm looking for, color and movement more than anything else. I'm not making perfect fur yet. We'll add some beige and some white. But then I start to add the open medium. Now the open medium will keep the color I'm putting on top thicker, the color underneath thinner. It's like painting the clouds, right? In a landscape, you've seen me do that. So I'm going to take some here. We're going to plan this one right here that it swoops out and swoops this one out. And see, you can get that fur look because you're streaking on color that's thicker onto color that's thinner. The original thinness of it here, right? And so the color that's thicker overpowers the thinner color, and that's where I get the streaks, the fur. So we'll come right into here, pull some of this down, use some shorter strokes onto it. And like all things, we'll build it up a bit. A little more burnt sienna, a little bit of burnt umber here. We'll use some darker touches here every once in a while too, to break it up. Here, break it all up. And a bit of dark. So this is going to swoop down right in here. We'll push. So see, I'll go back and forth a few times, even with the darks here. We'll pull some of that down. Right like that, and I start to build the fur. And this is what I'm going to do throughout his whole body like this, build this fur. We'll go a little more light, a little bit of open medium, keep it nice and keep this thick here. Keep it thick there. We want this. Let's go just a touch lighter so we can get that little area of that shine. There. And you can wipe your brush, even take a second brush like a clean number 10 here, put a bit of the dark, and you can go back and forth. So I'll take some of this out. We'll leave little marks. Take some of this back out like that to get little highs and lows in the fur, see? And it's a process. But the most important part of the process, guys, is your darks are thin, your lights are thicker. That's what's giving you the fur. Just remember that. Your darks are thin, your lights are thicker, and that's what's giving you the fur. Okay, so let's add some of this right in here. Right in there. There we go. And I could use the small brush here, you know, change brushes. Now see, I can get this fur look, keep that open medium, really easy, even though I'm not using like a bristle or spreading, you know, a fan brush like a lot of people use, just because I'm using the consistencies of the paint, the highs and lows of the paint, the understanding of flow dynamics of paint, and that thicker paint does not flow as easier as thinner paint. So that's what gives you these beautiful looks. So we can build some of this up here. And you can let this dry and pull back and do it again, you know. Let's take some shadow on the big brush this time. Pull that through here, like that. And build some of this here. Try to get the, sometimes it takes me a few times to get the flow of the fur correct. And I start to do just very specific marks as I start to get closer and closer to what I want. I'll start to do very specific marks of color, but I don't want to get this like too individual. It's getting really individual. This is really individual. It starts to take away from his eye a bit there. And so, you know, I told myself at the beginning, one of the things I mentioned in the early video was we might end up changing some of that so that we don't soften some of this with the larger brush, so that we don't take away from his face. That makes sense, if you remember that. So we'll do that a bit here. Get a little bit of this curvature here. But soften that just a touch in through there like that. Maybe a touch lighter yellow, a little bit of open medium. Keep it thick right in here. Right in there like that. If you get too many of those little marks, pick up some of your dark and just touch through. And that'll soften some of them out. We're going to leave a bit of that light. You know, right, this is light and shadow. This is where the light is coming across him there. So we'll let that build just a bit right here. That's the shadow from his face right there. Let's revisit this curved shadow here. Wipe your brush. Wipe your brush. So it's, guys, the whole thing here, you know, it's kind of magical and kind of fun. It's all with the thickness of your paint. That is the key. Using the thicker paint on top of the thinner paint. And that's why I have this perfect consistency right here to lay on some of these smaller little marks of hair here. Right like that. And can't get all of that exact, but we can come pretty darn close. You can see, you know, we can get pretty darn close. And especially with the large brush, using the corners and edges and everything of the large brush, which is, you would think, oh, I'll take a lot of people take a small liner brush, go in there and start doing that. I don't. That, to me, is like, takes away for some of the pure alla prima of the painting, which I don't like to do. There's still some values that I see need to clean up and fix up and stuff like that in there, but this is getting closer here. A little thicker, little thicker right here. Let's fix this edge of the transitional area here. Let's get some of this transitional dark right here. A little bit of blue, a little bit of burnt umber here. Some of this widen out and dark. Some of this cast shadow right here. This is a cast shadow from the side of his face because the light is right up here. Some of it pulls down just a bit, a little bluish to it as it's in the cast shadow, right? Okay, there we go. Let's use just the corner. So sometimes just the corner of the big brush. Use that to add some of that modeling and stuff there. And can really make a nice, let's just put a bit of this right up like that. There we go. Now, I've got what? I like to look at my things. Got 35 minutes worth of film left, okay? So let's go before we leave this and we start working some of these other areas. I like this back here. I might take a bit of this blue and paint that into that edge again. I like that lost edge back there, right? And it really brings your eye in here to the subject. But let's go in and work. Let's get some of that pinkish cast, burnt sienna, and I'll thin this out. Shadows, kind of thick, and some burnt umber, burnt sienna, and some red. Maybe a touch of white and touch of the medium beige, which will give you that softer look to it. Let's put some pink into his ears, right? Using the big 3/4 inch brush. We'll get some of that pink into his ears. We then half tone up. Let's add a little burnt sienna, a little raw sienna, a little medium beige. So we're there. Let's half tone up and maybe a bit of the burnt umber. So the burnt umber is where we're going. So let me just put some of that over here. Here's the dark where we're going. So we want to go from here to there with a little half tone now. And we'll use that moving through some of this area here. And when I paint the ears, boy, I really like to do them as casual as possible because they carry a lot of interest and stuff in the painting, huge amounts of interest, and they can take away really easy of your subject if you're not careful, right? So I like to do them without great big huge contrasting strokes and all that kind of stuff. So okay, so let's thin this just a bit. So thin, so I'm working into the shadow parts of it. I'm working this in more thin because I got hair to put on here, right? We have some hair to put on, and we don't want that hair to be huge, dark, contrasting. Let's now go a little bit darker to this. Go and we'll hit some of these little edges. Some of these nice little contrast edges here. Softer, pull some in and out. That little shadow line we put on earlier. Right? Blur some of these edges. Thin, I'm still kind of thin here. Here. And I'll take a clean part of my paper towel, pull back in. Wipe clean part of my paper towel, pull back in to keep those edges really quite a bit less than what I see there. Let's set some of that dark, just some of that fur dark movement up in here. Fur dark movement up in here. Right like that. Okay. And now let's grab our smaller brush, like our number 10. Let's see, that's an 8 or a 10. Doesn't make, let's see, let's grab a bit of raw sienna, a bit of yellow, burnt sienna, some medium beige, all this medium color here. A little bit of light, not to our lightest yet, right? And we'll just work some of this right where we see some of the light tones coming through up here into his ear, right? And so when you see the edge of the dark there, now I can take my brush, see I got a lot of dark there, and I can take my brush and just work these, and this is what I call incorporating it. I'm not blending it. I'm not creating a third tone. I'm just tapping the edges and incorporating it, okay? I don't want to lose the look of the hair, which is if I move it too much, I will. Let's pick up some more. Sometimes I do this with the knife, the palette knife, so I don't disrupt it too much here, right? Okay. A little bit lighter maybe. Here. A little bit more yellow, raw sienna, mottled into that. Just a bit lighter. There we go. Well, just a few kind of little marks up here. Scumble marks. Bit of this light mark right here, which is really kind of neat, important. There. And some dark, a little bit darker, bringing these together. Right in there. I could have, I mean, you could get really specific with it and try to copy everything. I don't. I try to capture the image of it without getting too detailed here. Let's soften the edge. There's a half tone here, transitional half tone, light to dark right in here. So let's just soften that. That's a little too dark. Let's go more raw sienna here. Right up about a value 4 or so, right along the edge of his head there. Where that's softening, let's get just a touch of that light up there. Right like that. That works better. It's not quite perfect, but, and let's just continue on while this is wet. A little thicker, so I'm adding the open medium. Anytime I'm making the fur, his hair, I'm using the open medium because that keeps the color thicker, right? And a little yellow, a little raw sienna, keeps it thicker. There. And little touches of it right up here. There. Let's just pull some of this out. A little bit of that darker pink we could pull right back into that to shape it up a bit, like that. It's got burnt sienna, blue, beige. This is, excuse me, burnt umber. This is darker, so extender into it. Some darker touches here. Right there. Darker touch right in here again, along that edge. And don't breathe. You can push in and out and blur this edge too. you know, or just drag right around. Now, the other way to do that, because all of that has been painted today, and it's what? We've been painting an hour, just almost an hour and 26 minutes today, right? I can take just my brush with some water, as long as you're within a couple hours, see, and I can just run it along the edge and really soften that edge, giving it that lost edge, which works really well there. You see that. And I'm going to take a little bit of the red and burnt umber right here, and let's increase that darkness right in there, up his ear a bit. Blur that out just a touch. That hits that transition right there pretty good, right? Pull just a bit of that in here. I just love doing this. When I first started, oh boy, howdy, I was wondering, am I ever going to be able to do this? But as your eye gets better, guys, it's so true. As you do this and you concentrate on those values, use these value scales, right? Put them up there. And I should just hold this up there. You guys can see the values that I'm using here. Look how dark I'm down there to how light I'm going right into there, right? And I mean, it's really starting to bring him to life. And, but we're going to use these value scales, use these things. Your eye's going to slowly see a few more, a little bit more. Let's get rid of that little bit of blue there. But, you know, paint some of this in, these edges in here, in and out. Soften some of those. You know, that's just, it's good stuff. It's fun stuff. And each one you do, you get better and better. I think I've done probably maybe a dozen of these animal portraits like this, and each one gets a little better and better. But what makes it really good is I'm doing other human portraits, I'm doing other florals, and I'm using the same techniques, refining my eye. I'm refining my eye. Let's just pull that in a bit. Blur that edge, right? Get some of that dark right in here. I don't want to get, he's got great ears, and our shepherd out at the farm has just great ears, beautiful ears. And, you know, you just don't want to do too much to that there. Okay, so yeah, that looks pretty darn good so far. I mean, we're capturing him. I want to get some more light and stuff here before we run out of time here. And maybe let's take some extender and some of this to get some of this dark down through here again. A little bit more. Put a bit more on him out through here, right? And I really like to develop the chest and stuff area here. So let's take burnt sienna, little raw sienna, a touch of this dark, and let's reset some of this dark right up in here that we're going to go. And this is going to be a step process, guys. I'm going to have to do this a couple times, but I'm going to kind of follow the shape of his hair here, right? We'll get some of that in. And burnt sienna, raw sienna, some burnt umber, extender. Model it, don't mix it up real well, so it comes off in different amounts here. And if it goes too much burnt sienna on you, too reddish, you can always add a tiny bit of green, which will, you know, that's a lot of green, but you can see the green takes that color right back, gets him into that shadow tone there, really nice. What that shadow tone is there. And we can start developing these are called form shadows, even though it's his hair color. We're developing some of the form shadows of him, is what I'm thinking when I'm doing this. Get some of that green in there. Let's go more burnt umber, maybe a touch of blue, thin it out. Let's get some of the darks in through here. And these I'm really gonna paint him casual back here because I want his face to go up. So I don't want it to be too much about everything back here, right? So we'll keep it kind of soft and just model the color in through there. Might even just take the big brush here and just pull right through some of that so we keep everything soft here. Understated, and some of those grays and stuff like that, we might, you know, usually what I'll do is let maybe some of that dry up and with a damp brush and then just pull the edge here so that just blurs the edge off, because we don't need to have a whole lot going on out here of this. Get that hip up a little bit bigger. He's just a bit there, and let some of that fade out. But let's get some of the warm colors in here, and then we'll let that dry up and stuff, and then we'll be able to come back and work on him some more. As this dries up, we'll come back and restate everything and work on him a little bit more. And everyone will start catching a better idea of what he's going to look like. Let's get some beige in there as that yellow starts to go away. We'll get the beige in there. Here. Here like that. Work that in. Right? And get a bit of extender. Sometimes only when I really want to make the fur, which I'm not quite there yet, I'm almost, do I add that open medium. So I keep everything kind of thin until I start to make the fur. Right? Okay. So we have that. We'll look back in that dark, and then we can take some light right with this. Now the open medium. And let's take some light and let's just move some light. Let's build up this forward shoulder here. Right? Build up the light. Right here. Some of this. And here. There, we'll just set some of his shape here. Try not to stop breathing. I do when I do these real big ones here. So we'll work on his forward shoulder here, this area. I'm going to do this again a couple times. So we're not, this is just to start setting it, start finding some of it. We want some of this. Here, let's look at that real light. And again, sometimes I'll put these real lights on with the knife. But he's going to have this real light band here. Real light band. And they're powerful. You know, the strokes that I'm doing here, they're very powerful and deliberate strokes. They're hard to do. And so it's kind of like, is this a beginner one or something? Yeah, because, you know, I always say this where he says, well, you know, you get some comments sometimes from somebody that says, that's a little too hard for a beginner. That's not a beginner one. Well, how do you paint a beginner portrait? Do you eliminate a nose? Do you get rid of one eye? No. You work it again and again and again and again. How I've been teaching for, well, I've been painting for 50 years. I've been teaching for over 35 and years, almost 40 years. And I have found over the time, I slow down and I explain more. And then it's just practice until you get the confidence of what's going to happen. Now look how mottled my brush is. See? That is what's making the hair. And I'm going to look, I look over there at that and I get a good feel for the direction of the fur that I want to do. And I look at that area and I make very deliberate marks. And then I'll come back and refine those marks. but I make very deliberate marks and sometimes stutters like this to put in different areas here. But very deliberate marks. Pick up some more paint here. Let's lift off light pressure, and that'll give me more hair here, and stuff. So yeah, it is practice too that's going to do this, guys. It's practice, right? And I'll pull through. See, this is still wet where I did it earlier. That's all still wet. Looks pretty good, right? We might have a few little marks of light up here, just little bits, little touches of that light here. Right, that's pretty good. Maybe some of the burnt sienna, raw sienna, burnt umber, some of these tone shadows, little deeper marks, a little bit of that burnt sienna, like that slight little reddish cast in there, like that. And we're going to cool this down, a little blue into some of this, lighten it, a little bit of blue into it, and just touch more yellow. And this is the cast shadow color. It's right here into his fur. Cast shadow color, I'm looking at that right up there. We'll pull this out. That's his face up here into the cast shadow right there. And I'm going to have to do that again. It's a little bit grayed, so I'll have to do that again. We'll do it again. Let's pick up some of this yellow. There we go. A little raw sienna. Thick paint makes the fur, right? Thick paint. Thick paint makes the fur. And yeah, let's get a little more raw sienna, yellow, white, bit of open medium, model, a little more white, a little more open medium. Model it so it's not, see, it's not perfectly one color. There we go. And we can take our brush, pinch wipe it like this, and soften back through. If you got some of that nice movement there, but a little too much, just pull through it a bit, wipe your brush, pull through it again. Soften some of those movements like that. Let's grab just a bit of a medium tone here. Maybe just a little bit, not quite as light of a hair stroke there. There we go. I'm going to do this again, but it's pretty close, really, to what I like. I like it there, pretty close. Let's put a little bit of shadow in there. A little bit of light and shadow. So see, I just, little shadows, a little thinner hair. So this is a little thinner. This is a little thicker. And that's what's giving you that look, see? Right? A little yellow, burnt sienna. Thin it out just a bit. So it's thin, so it doesn't have as much power to take it out quite as fast. And you can soften some of your movements there. Right? Let's pull this in. Let's soften some of that a bit. A little bit more hair coming down there. Try to get it as close as I can, but I'm not worried about being perfect, because then I'll just start making him too stiff, but he gets pretty darn close. Let's take some of this light and build this up again. right like that. And pretty good. But sad thing is we're out of time again. I was going to do this in just 2. And normally when I do that and I got a lot, I say, okay, this is what I'm going to do through the whole thing. But I got so many nice compliments on the first one. Thank you for slowing way down and doing what you're doing and explaining everything. I'm gonna slow down and explain this again. So here we go with the guy. That's what he looks like right now. And I'm going to slow down and work the next stitch, and I'll finish him up with the next. I can easily finish him up with the next one. So, but I think, I hope you enjoy, even though it's a little bit longer, a little bit more detailed and stuff, I hope you enjoy this particular process with it. I enjoy presenting him this way. And I know I talk a lot, but I like to teach to you guys. I like to tell you what it is I'm doing. And I always, always, always appreciated that when my teachers did that, my instructors. And, you know, I'm just coming in and just adding a little bit more light right up against this. But I want to leave that nice alla prima casual edge there. And you get that little bit of cast shadow, maybe a bit more touch of the gray. Let's thin this out. Thin, thin, thin here. And just kind of glaze that on a bit, following the direction of the hair. And get that feel of that cast shadow there. It's not quite right. There's a cast shadow on that one, you can see. It's not quite right, but getting closer. Let's put just a bit of that right into here. And yeah, and so I'll finish up working this and working this area and all that kind of stuff next time. And we'll want to go in and, you know what? Let's take a look at this. I've got like seconds left here. Let's just take a look at this and show what that little catch light would be. Not pure white. I'm going to put a little bit of the blue in it because he's got so much blue. And we're going to want to add some blue into him as well. Don't let me forget that. Make sure you tell me that next time. I'll forget it. Matter of fact, maybe I'll put a little mark of blue so I don't forget it. Let's go above, since the light is coming from upper this side, we'll go on the pupil just to the light, about 11 o'clock on the pupil, upper left there. Sometimes I put a lower catch light and then the catch light. This time I'm just going to go catch light or low shine. This one will be a little bit less, so I'll touch it and tap it just a bit. Let's increase that just a touch here on this one. Just a small little touch. I love the catch lights because they give so much. I got wet paint, drug it on my hand. That's fur. But the catch lights just add so much. And let's put just a tiny bit right along the edge here, which simulates, and I'll paint it in and take it out, a little bit of the wetness of the eye here. So I'll put that in. Let's just take a damp brush and draw it right along the edge there. And so that is not showing up that big on the original, but I like it. So just like that, that gives him that much, a little bit more. So there you go, okay? 7 minutes left. We got it under the wire. So one more, okay? One more. We'll do that the next day, tomorrow or the next day, depending on what I got going on here at the studio, and I'll finish him all up. We'll add a few more little things and stuff like that in here, but he's taken another step towards that guy right there, right? And I think overall, we're doing pretty darn good when we're looking at him. He could have a little more blue into his ears and stuff, but he's getting there, right? You look at that, he's getting there. He's getting closer to him there. So that's pretty good, okay? Thanks very much, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and that like button. Leave us a comment down there even if you just want to say, wow, Dave, that's just great. Go ahead and say that down there. I'll give you a thumbs up, okay? And I hope to see you guys on the next one. On the next one here as we finish him up. And if you want to see more of these types of techniques, make sure you leave a comment and say, let's do some more. Because these are the kinds of techniques that, like, all this is what I do in clouds and everything else in landscapes. And I use a lot of these techniques in painting the florals. But when you paint them, guys, to something different, like if somebody say, well, how do you get up to being a little bit better? I went to start painting, animal portraits, bird portraits, and people portraits, because it was a different thing. I was way out of my wheelhouse. And it caused me to look at colors and halftones, transitional tones, light and dark values, warms and cools, so much differently than anything else. And yeah, and that's what caused that. And before I leave here, I'm going to put a little bit of the blue, just a mark or two here so I don't forget about it later on. I'm going to put a little bit of the blue right in here where I think it's going to go on him anyway. So we'll do just so I don't forget that on the next day, tomorrow or so, okay? So we'll just do a little bit of that there. All right, so I don't forget. And it's such a great little technique. And this is what I learned. This blue that you added in here is what I learned from Western painters. I noticed the Western painters did it, and I love it, okay? All right, guys. See you on the next one. Getting a warning sign. Okay, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.